This is Earl Nightingale with the first issue of Direct Line. The purpose of this new program is to explore ideas, the best ideas from the past and present as they pertain to you and me and the mystery of our lives. Ideas about people, why they do the things they do, and why they don't do some of the things they could do. Why they live the way they do, believe the way they do, work and play the way they do. Our most distinguished and eloquent researchers in the field of psychology and psychiatry tell us that our affluent society has not brought us happiness and joy. On the contrary, people in the highly developed, wealthy nations of the world seem to be suffering from a malaise made up of boredom, apathy, and general depression. And we know that people are at their best, that is, they seem to be happiest and most energetic, when they're striving toward the fulfillment of what seems to them to be good and worthy ideas. Isn't that true? People move mountains and dance and sing far into the night when they're swept up by a great idea. There's something about the human creature that makes him godlike when he's moved by a great idea, and apathetic, bored, and depressed when he's not. Wherever you find boredom, you'll find the absence of a good idea, in a child or an adult. People are depressed and bored when they know deep down in the very fibers of their being that the life they're living is not what it could be, not what it ought to be. We suffer from an all-pervading feeling of guilt when we're living below our true capacities in our work and in our play. We've been chasing a mistaken concept of what success is all about. We've confused means with ends. We'll find success, each of us in his own way, when we find ourselves. And when we do, all things that we want and need will be added to our lives. Ideas bring the fresh, clean air of renewal into our lives, into our home lives, into our business lives. The real fun of life is in continually bridging the gap which lies between where we are and where we want to be, and from what we are to what we wish to become. There are three main departments of living with which we should concern ourselves and in which we should succeed. They are, number one, our family lives. Number two, the way we spend our days, on the job and off. And number three, our income. The purpose of this program is to help us find more meaning, more real success in each of these vital departments. First, just a word about listening. You know, when we listen, and especially to information that involves us personally, our minds only pay attention to what we're hearing until something we hear triggers an idea in our minds. Now, at that instant, our minds tune out and concentrate on the new thought. It's like lifting the tone arm on a record player. We no longer hear anything, but the record keeps turning. Now, when you hear something in direct line that sparks an idea, you tune me out for whatever time you devote to the idea. You'll do this repeatedly. The next time you listen, you will tune out at different times. Because of the way we listen and because our attention will dart from what we're hearing to what we're thinking about, it's necessary to hear a spoken message several times just to hear it for the first time. And even weeks, months, or years later, it will spark new ideas. So if it's convenient, stop the player whenever you want to think about something you hear. Perhaps you want to make a note of what you've heard or think about it for some time. Then, when you're ready to resume, start the player again, and so on. If you're driving your car or if the whole family's listening, that might not be practicable. But even with stops and starts, repeated listening is necessary to make what you hear a part of your way of thinking and doing things. Unfortunately, we don't learn much from something we read only once. If it were printed, it would take time away from other things. In audio form, it can be listened to while we're doing other things, such as commuting to and from work, while traveling on business calls, while dressing, having breakfast, while relaxing after a long day, and so on. Moreover, in this form, it can be heard by all members of the family. If it were only in printed form, it's unlikely that it would be read by more than one, two at most. Another important reason for the cassette tape is that listening is our most effective and effortless way of obtaining information, the most natural way to learn anything. We learned by listening for many years as children before we learned to read. You see, we pluck ideas from speech as we might catch fish from a flowing river. We're not even conscious of the words being used. We listen for ideas, and that's what this program is all about. We learn to read by listening. And for most, reading remains something of a mechanical process from which ideas must be constructed. And finally, the spoken word carries so much more interest and flavor, so much more meaning, and an emotional impact impossible with the printed word. Well, let's begin with this great thought. It has appeared in many forms in man's literature, but I believe it was Emerson who put it best. Nature magically suits the man to his fortunes by making these the fruit of his character. We might experience some difficulty in finding out what we're really like by trying to look inward, but we have only to look about us at our fortunes, for they are the fruit of our character. The late Dr. Maslow, former president of the American Psychological Association, said you judge a person the same way you judge an apple tree, by his fruit, by what he produces. Do you go along with that? It's hard not to, isn't it? Well, what is character? My Random House on a Bridge says character is the aggregate of features and traits that form the apparent individual nature of some person or thing. My Oxford English Dictionary gives as its first definition a distinctive mark, impressed, engraved, or otherwise formed, a brand, a stamp. Any person who has had the chance to live as an adult for any appreciable length of time begins to collect about him what we can call his fortunes. They represent a merciless mirror of him as a person. They reflect his nature and constitute, in total, a distinctive mark, a brand, a stamp. Just as you can tell the name of a fruit tree by examining its fruit, you can tell a great deal about a person in the same way. And we can tell a great deal about ourselves. We surround ourselves in an environment, in circumstances, as Professor Jose Ortega y Gasset used the word, which reflect us, and which include our true beliefs. No matter how loudly we talk about what we believe in, our circumstances reflect our true beliefs. They show to others what is important to us. They reflect our degree of maturity at any given stage of our lives. You see, our fortunes are simply the sum total of what we want and believe we are qualified to receive at any given stage of our lives. For our fortunes should change. They should not just accumulate as we get older, they should change in quality. Change to reflect the changing person. If they do not change, it is an indication that we are not changing. If they do not grow in quality, it's an indication that we are not growing and maturing as persons. Our fortunes are the fruit of our character, and our character changes. Someone once said to Dr. Robert Hutchins when he was chancellor of the University of Chicago with regard to adult education, that you can't teach old dogs new tricks. To which Dr. Hutchins replied, human beings are not dogs, and education is not a bag of tricks. We can grow through knowledge with good ideas, and as we grow, our worlds will change to reflect our growth. We outgrow our old selves and shake them off like stiff cocoons, no longer big enough to contain us, and that's as it should be. That's the way a person, a family, an organization of any kind should grow. We might say that a person, or an organization, will grow in proportion to two main conditions. The first concerns his degree of receptivity. Are his windows open to the fresh breeze of renewal in the form of new ideas and creative thinking? Many persons, in organizations are closed systems. They've got their windows closed and locked, apparently in the belief that they're already the repository of all useful information. We can all name such persons and such organizations, some quite large, but shrinking. The one thing that always typifies a closed system is that it ultimately begins to shrink, and it will eventually die if it stays closed long enough. Any person or persons making up the management of any sort of organization who feel no need for new ideas, or who do not challenge their own beliefs from time to time, are on the road down toward stagnation and decay. And the second condition governing a person's or organization's growth will be determined by the source or sources of ideas. Now, if our ideas come to us only from those by whom we're habitually surrounded, those who live much as we do, we'll tend to do little more than reiterate and fortify the ideas we already live by. That's also true in an organizational sense. A person can be said to be an organization, indeed a highly complex organization. Like any other sort of organization, the overall success will be determined by the quality of management. Just as the success of any business or other organization depends for its success or failure upon its management, so does the success or failure of a person depend upon the way he manages himself. We're all units of production. We produce things and words and attitudes which reflect our management, and the quality of our product, our total product, will be determined by the quality of our own self-management. Now, we can determine the quality of our overall product by simply assessing what we're being paid for it. It's true for a person, or for a business firm, or any sort of organization. And we might say the quality of our management will be determined by the quality of our ideas. The main ideas of our lives are the main roads on which we travel. So where do we get most of our ideas?